All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Bob Balfance, the director of the Everyone Graduates Center, and I welcome you to the Pathways to Adult Success Solutions Forums and to our third in our three-part series on community collaborations to prepare young people for adult success. Greg, if you can go to the next slide. Today, we have three very exciting presentations and really showing the power of community collaborations to do big and important things, right? We're going to see an example from our friends in Spokane County, Washington, on what it takes to enable all our students to attend school on a regular basis from all our communities. We're going to hear from our friends in Baltimore City on what does it take to create the necessary frameworks and supports and resources so that every student can have a mentor, right? And it's not just for a few, but it's for the many. And then we're going to hear from our friends in Albuquerque, really on how do we really get our schools to work together, our middle and high schools, to create sort of a unified and coherent experience for our students. So three different types of collaboration, three different types of collaborating partners, but all really taking on big issues that they couldn't do if they didn't work with others in their community. And that's really a theme we've been doing throughout this three-part series, focusing on community collaborations. We're going to have each of our presenters will present. We'll have time after each one for some Q&A and then some Q&A at the end. As always, we ask people to share your ideas, your resources, any questions you have in the chat as we go along. So if you can put your questions in as they come up, and we'll address them when we get to the end of each session or at the end. We will also, as always, record the sessions and send those out along with all the resources shared to everybody who's registered. Next slide. This is just reminding ourselves that we're here because building pathways to adult success for and with all our students has never been so crucial. We always say the times couldn't be more complex, then they get more complex. So if there was ever a time for us to work together, it's in those times where there's uncertainty and a lot of change. And the only way to sort of navigate through that is to work together and keep thinking ways to find opportunities to provide our students with the supports they and their families need so they can be on that pathway to adult success, which enables all our communities to thrive. Next slide. All right, so we're gonna first hear from our friends from Spokane on their K-12 attendance task force. Then we'll hear from our friends in Baltimore City on their framework for quality mentoring, and then from the team in Albuquerque on how they're bringing their middle and high schools together. So we're going to begin with our friends from Spokane, and I'll just ask them to come on and introduce themselves and show us what they're learning.
Great. Hi, everybody. I guess I can say good morning, representing the Pacific time zone here. And we should be in presentation mode. There we go. How's that for you all? We good? Hi, again, Matt Bumpus. I am here in Spokane, Washington. I am privileged to be the Director of Research at Inovia Foundation, which before I start, just thank you to Bob and your team. We're really grateful for your support of our work and to be a part of this. It's been a real privilege for us. Inovia is a community foundation located in Spokane, Washington. We serve 20 counties. Here's an overview of our service region. Half of our counties are in Eastern Washington, half in Northern Idaho. Politically divided, mainly rural. We serve about 1 million residents, and about half of those residents live in Spokane County, which is that star kind of right there in Eastern Washington. So I wanted to share a little bit about our work and what we're learning in terms of supporting students, in particular around an initiative that we launched a couple of years ago called Launch Northwest. And it was developed in response to low rates of post-high school enrollment and degree completion among students in our region. We are well above 90% high school graduation rates and well below 50% go-on rates for students who graduate from high school. And also, as you can see from the slide here, Launch Northwest is a model that pairs a Promise Scholarship with comprehensive supports for students and families in our region. Lots of partners, K-12, higher education, nonprofits, community partners, the business community. And one principle of our work is that when we say comprehensive supports for youth and families, that needs to be decided with community voice. What are the comprehensive supports that make sense in our region? And in particular, I want to focus on one way that we do that with task forces that are made up of cross-sector groups of residents with experience and expertise in a particular area. So just over a year ago, we formed a K-12 attendance task force. And that task force has school district personnel, members of underrepresented racial ethnic groups, community health workers, juvenile justice members, community college administrators, trying to think, and we meet regularly, trying to think about ways to support K-12 attendance from a collective impact perspective. That is, how can we focus on ways to address K-12 attendance that might not be feasible for an individual school or an individual district, that the power comes in being cross-sector and thinking creatively. And one thing this group focused in on right away was the rates of attendance among students in our county who are of Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander descent. And you see those here, significantly lower among those Native Hawaiian, rather, Pacific Islander students. And so in Spokane County, a little context here, the largest group that makes up that category is people who are here from the Marshall Islands. And we in Spokane have learned quite a lot about the Marshall Islands recently because of just the frequency with Marshall Islands natives are relocating to Spokane. So about 7,000 residents in Spokane currently are Marshall Islands natives. That slide says 5,000. It's about 7,000 in the county if we zoom out. And for context, there's only about 40,000 residents of the Marshall Islands living in the Marshall Islands right now. So from the map, you can see where the islands are located, about halfway between Hawaii and Australia. And we don't have time to get into the very disconcerting, sad, and really overwhelming history of the U.S. government and the U.S. military presence in the Marshall Islands, including the effects of nuclear weapons testing during the Cold War. One byproduct of that is that people from the Marshall Islands can come to the U.S. and live and work indefinitely without a visa, and that has become increasingly common. So back to our task force, we set out to learn about Marshallese culture. What does it mean to live, work, attend school in Spokane for Marshallese families? We tried to approach that work from a position of humility and learning and not blaming or deficit-based. We invited a community health worker who herself is Marshallese to join our task force, and she has become a vital member of that group. And then it followed up with listening sessions involving pastors, involving community leaders. We've had 3 listening sessions. This slide just says 1, but we've had a couple of additional sessions. Meeting with pastors. Churches are a hub for the Marshallese community in Spokane County. We have about 14 Marshallese churches in Spokane County, along with several other house churches. And I just want to share with you a little bit about what we learned, but circle back to that idea of collective impact and systems change. And there's a great quote that we try and think about from John Kania around systems change. And the idea that shifting systems change involves shifting the conditions that are holding the problem in place. How can we work on, and by problem, we don't mean a deficit model of blaming, but the problem of lack of support, lack of engagement from institutions towards our friends in the Marshallese community. So let me share a little bit about what we've learned and what we're doing. One theme that we hear is, depending on who we talk to, sometimes we hear, well, Marshallese people don't care about education. And that is a widely held, but people from the Marshallese community would certainly push back on that. And in fact, prioritizing education is often a reason why they are in the US in the first place. One thing we learned and heard over and over is that often confrontation is difficult for our Marshallese friends. And that maybe sounds like a generalization, but they talked about things like, quote, problem behavior, like low attendance. And often that gets communicated to Marshallese families in ways that are confusing or leave them feeling blamed. And often a response to that feeling blamed is to avoid, which creates this cycle that results in even lower rates of attendance. We heard that Marshallese children are often taught not to look adults in the eye when speaking with them. And again, how is that interpreted from institutions? Is that interpreted as misbehavior, not listening, not being respectful? So this mismatch between cultural norms and our institution's response to the students and families that we're serving. We heard that transportation is an issue, and that often families are sharing one car across multiple families. We talked a lot about time. And what does it mean to be on time? And to what extent is that a Western or individualistic value? And we heard stories about from our friends in the Marshall Islands when they lived there about, for example, it's not uncommon for teachers to be, quote, late to school. And from the Marshallese perspective, they're not late. It's just that school starts whenever the teacher arrives, and everybody else adjusts to that. That an important conversation, an issue with a neighbor might come up and take precedence over getting to school at a particular time, even for the teacher. We know that belonging is key, and we know that English is not the primary language spoken at home for most Marshallese students. So some things we're doing. One thing we realized was that Marshallese, our Marshallese leaders talked about these phone calls that families get when a student is absent from school. And those phone calls are A, a robocall, and B, they're in English. And so parents think it's spam. Students, not surprisingly, maybe aren't all that excited to share the contents of those calls with their parents if their parents are not native speakers. So in response to some listening sessions, Spokane Public Schools translated that call home into 12 languages, including Marshallese. And we've played a role in sharing out those translated calls and some of the learning that was done around the technology needed to match a student's language spoken at home with the correct language of the robocall. So it's not ideal. It's still kind of impersonal, but it does create more connection and more opportunities for parents to be in the loop about what's happening with their kids. Certainly, that's just one part of a larger strategy to support student engagement and attendance. I'm really excited about the second bullet point here. We just have finalized approval to braid funding from some of our medium-sized districts in our county with some of the funding from the grant and other foundation funding to create a 3-year district support position that will be focused on Marshallese students and families. We will prioritize having that person in that role themselves be Marshallese, and will be shared among our districts that don't have the resources on their own for that kind of position. It won't just be a translator, it will be a cultural kind of person to promote cultural understanding and belonging. Some of the things we're building into the position are graduation pathway support, ways to think kind of broadly about families connecting, and ways to connect, for example, children who aren't yet in the K-12 system with early district preschool or early childhood programs. Access to after-school homework clubs and supports. We'll rely on this person in this role to work on, especially with our younger students, on K-3 attendance and literacy education and outreach, especially for our multilingual students. And then smaller things like making sure that students can wear cultural regalia as part of their graduation or promotion ceremonies. And then a couple quickly, we're also working on transportation challenges and some of the difficult realities that many of our students ride the city bus to get to school in Spokane, and that creates challenges. And we are also working on ways to support Pacific Islander student clubs at a couple of our local high schools. So we've been able to provide some supports for some activities that they're doing. That's my time. I just, again, really appreciate the chance to be here and share a little bit about what we're doing and what we've learned, and just, again, grateful for the partnership. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. It was a great presentation, and just a quick comment and a question, and then I see that Jeannie's got a comment. If everybody else has a question, please put it in the chat. But I think one thing that just is just a good, nice observation is, you've had a sort of a longer standing collective impact effort, and it's sort of around, increasing the number of kids going to post-secondary, but you were able to pivot, right? And to say, like, now we have an attendance challenge, and like, that's a sort of a precursor to some of these other things. Then and then we have this within that sort of the challenge of our Marshallese families. And it's just a nice example of a collective impact thing being nimble, because sometimes the collective impact we got our goals and we just hammer them, right? So I just think that was a nice example of how that you could have collective impact, but you also have to be nimble to the situation, right? And I just wanted to signal that out. And I was just curious that, you had some very good recommendations. I was wondering that when you were talking to the families themselves, if you got anything that was maybe slightly more unconventional advice that might help them attend more. I was just curious, it was.
I don't know that there was anything that would stand out as particularly
Okay.
wow. It's tremendously important to have somebody in the school who they feel a connection to. And in our largest district, that is a small team of Marshallese support staff that just have a tremendous amount of influence within the community. So yeah, that's certainly one thing.
Great. See, Anne, do you want to just share
yeah,
the chat?
Bob. So Jeannie has commented that Albuquerque Public Schools has also recently become more aware of immigrant families and their need for belonging. And they've added a families to families category to the grad partnerships, strong supportive relationships, and hoping to engage families through cultural events and family to family conversations. So that's a comment. And then Sharon has a great question. She's asking, what are some of the ways that the district or districts are strengthening internal cultural competency to serve Marshallese students?
Yeah, we are not very far down that road yet, Sharon. I love that question. It's something we are really wrestling with, is recognizing the need for increased understanding for some of the cultural challenges that our Marshallese community faces, just kind of rubbing up against institutional rigidness and ways that just are difficult. So we don't have a great answer yet on that. We're still wrestling with how to best support district efforts in this, and you know, it's a I suppose a part of a larger question about how do we broadly support cultural competency in this political era, and yeah, we're struggling with that, frankly. I mean, you know, I think we can lean on policies like translating the robocalls, but if that's you know, and one position across multiple small districts, medium-sized districts, but that's not enough. We need to continue to lean on changing the support and the posture of our district personnel for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, now we get to go to the home team, our friends from Baltimore City, and how we get every kid a mentor. No? Sorry, Ann, did I miss something? Sorry. Yeah.
I was just going to say that Jeannie had a comment, but I'm sure we can catch her at the end.
Sure.
So
Yep.
it'll be fine.
All right. Over to Baltimore.
Hey, well, welcome. We can go to the next slide. We really appreciate being here with you all this afternoon. And we can jump right into who we are, a little framing. I am Laura Green, and there'll be some introductions on the next slide, but Mentor Maryland DC's mission is to increase the quality and quantity of mentoring relationships across Maryland, DC, and Northern VA. And we love this little quote there that potential is equally distributed, but opportunity often is not. How that translates into this work is that we believe that that caring adults are critical in a young person's journey to being felt supported and seen, and to ultimately excel. And so our goal is to ensure that as many young people in the DMV are nurtured and unlock their fullest potential. And this is where our partnership with City Schools comes into play. So this translates into partnering with as many school districts, workplaces, and communities to ensure that these are places where young people can truly thrive, learn, and grow. That translates into academic achievement, college, and career readiness. So our partnership with City Schools has been longstanding. We have partnered for several years. We, through sort of a design lab sort of concept, looked at mentoring in Baltimore City. We looked and studied other districts across the nation, kind of bought that secret sauce and some of those jewels and pearls back here in order to have local stakeholders really refine how City Schools' vision was when it comes to mentoring. And all of that really built a strong case for what is now a dedicated area in City Schools around mentoring. That's the Mars office, which Dr. Sophia is at the helm of. So we've been working together for years, and it's through this work that this grant, this Community Collaboration Challenge grant, helped us really take the work to the next level. So who are the partners? Dr. Sophia Rudisell Holmes, she is over the Mars office at Baltimore City Public Schools for the school district. Dr. Sharon, an amazing, phenomenal consultant. And then myself, Laura Green, Executive Director of Mentor Maryland, DC. I will say that we are committed to this partnership. We know that our city's young people deserve this sort of critical focus and partnering so that we can indeed build pathways toward adult success. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rudy so that we can share with you today our three main talking points, which is like what we've done, what we've learned, and next steps and call to action. And Dr. Rudy, you might be on mute.
Had to find the unmute button. Can everyone hear me now? Okay, awesome. So we all know this information around what it looks like locally and nationally in terms of the impact of mentoring. And so for us, as Laura alluded to, we started in 2021, and our focus with this particular community collaboration challenge was to look at building a sustainable evaluative infrastructure to scale impact. And so you'll see the messaging that we have been promoting across the city: every student deserves a mentor. And with that messaging, one of the focuses has been really looking at the baseline being we went from 5 to 40 students being budgeted in schools, 5 schools budgeting for student mentoring to 40, 102 students mentored to 981, and shifting from 76 to 985 mentors and 2 to 15 mentoring organizations. So that was our baseline. So when we talk about this particular opportunity, this collaboration grant, we were starting here first. And then with starting here, we slid into this focus that I will turn the mic over to Dr. Asangeyi to kind of walk us through what did we do with that baseline in terms of building out the student mentoring evaluative framework.
Equally searching for the mute button. Thank you for the heads up. So with regards to the work, it was important that this was co-created and that we were leveraging brilliant minds who are leading research, who are doing practical work, who are just being able to inform what is the next step. And so with that being said, we convened a group of subject matter experts who were really great in advising and just talking through key pieces. What we ended up landing on was building a framework that allowed us to define the logic model around a consultative process, which is how schools get connected with the resources in student mentoring. And from there, we then moved into deep conversations with school leaders and young people, and really having conversations to talk through what does that mean, what does that look like, and really reimagine and dreamscape around that. Then what happened subsequently after that were really critical things. One, in the developing of the logic model, which you take a look at it a little bit, we ensured that the student voice, we wanted to be student driven, because oftentimes with student mentoring, it is set and it's not often co-created with young people. And so there's an opportunity here to have the young people's voice really inform and direct the decisions that were being made. In sitting with them, for example, conversations and designing what does like student mentoring look like, they were able to elevate some standards that became built into how MAR is doing some of the work and practicing the work. We also designed a student survey, pre and post, so that we can really capture student experience across the district on how they're experiencing student mentoring.
And then Mentor was able to wrap it all up with a training to kind of roll out this work to begin to onboard colleagues at the district. And so with this, oh, my clicker, there it is. And so we expanded, we've been able to also, as a result of the consultative process, one of the big things that our subject matter experts made clear is that we could be very supportive with our schools in helping them to identify mentoring programs. So we knew that we had to also begin to expand our mentoring partners. And so again, going from 2 to 15, a part of the work is to increase the options of for our schools to be able to choose from in terms of choices of student mentoring programming, depending on the needs of the students and what is requested from the schools. So we've been actively supporting the programs with their school integration practices and collaborating with Bloomberg to look at what our stakeholder engagement strategy will be for 25-26. And then, of course, as you know, while we're all here, Mentor Maryland DC remains a vital partner in strengthening student mentoring across the district. And so what we're learning, insights from our data analysis and stakeholder engagement. Dr. Asangeyi.
So with this part, as I mentioned, we had subject matter experts and conversations with school leaders and young people, and really centered the young people, and everything else was just like validating to what was coming up. And one of the things that came up was that young people wanted supportive and non-judgmental relationships. Just being able to have someone who is kind, who's understanding, who's there for them is super critical to help them navigate the realities that they're navigating. and being able to meet diverse needs. So for example, support to go get my driver's license, those kind of things were coming up, where there are all these little key things that young people are naming, that was very individual, but when you're in the grand landscape of things, it's necessary and part of these like developmental pathways that young people are going through. Practical and career-oriented support. Having someone who can help them really understand and think through in terms of career, and being able to expand their network or expose them so they can start leaning into that reality and seeing if that is really where they want to pursue in terms of career options. And also one of the key part, which it's connected to how we've been practicing, is that evaluation criteria and feedback mechanism. And that's where the student survey really lives, which is just being able to understand these relationships that are happening between mentors and mentees. How are folks experiencing them? What are the conversations? What are the learnings around that? What does effectiveness look like? And so the student survey is one aspect that will allow us to build in these feedback mechanisms across the board of all student mentoring programs.
So next steps in call to action. For us, it's really big about, excuse me, scaling city school student mentoring to reach all students by 27-28. And so what does that mean for us? There's a heavy emphasis on access. So we're talking about access. Our colleagues from Spokane was just alluding to some of the challenges when you talk about big systems and infrastructure, and what does it look like for folks to even be able to access all of these wonderful things that we're talking about. And so by 27-28, we are aiming for 100% of our young people to have access to these resources. And so we need your help. We need your help as a community in terms of community involvement and support. You can scan here to learn more about mentoring at City Schools. Follow us on Instagram, mentoring_City Schools. Email us if you have questions, and of course, check us out. And so it's been a pleasure to do this work in partnership with Mentor Maryland, DC, and Dr. Asanga Yi, and just it's a journey, and we all are a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Baltimore team. That was very, very impressive. And as someone who's followed it from the beginning, I just wanted to share with people one thing is that what's sort of, I think, unique about the Baltimore approach is they are taking sort of this long-term approach. They're not doing this like in 3 years, we're going to try to get as many mentors as we can, and be done. They spent a lot of time early actually just building the infrastructure to even make this very audacious goal of getting to every student possible, which was a different way to approach it than people do, and I think a much more powerful way. But it did require them to take the long view, that this is going to take a while to get where we really want to go. I just want to shout them out for like having the courage of their convictions, Sophia, to take that approach, and through heck and high water, keep pushing. So I just wanted to, if you could reflect on that, what were some of the things in building that infrastructure and, getting to the point where you could go from 3 partners to 15 partners and go from a few schools to many schools? What were like some of the both, things that were harder and easier than you thought about building that infrastructure?
So I remember my colleague who brought me in, Danny Heller, who said to me that this is this moment, you're uniquely designed for the work, but it's going to be harder than you think. And that was wisdom in sharing that, because that, I think the opportunities have been to really work across departments internally to message the work and position the work to the interest has always been not to work in silo and to really create a context in which this can be embedded in the district practices. So the thinking has always been when we leave, our exit strategy, everything that we're building is with thought in mind that folks can pick it up and build on top of it. So that does take time. And so that's been the journey, because coming from the local and national nonprofit context, it's a lot. I have been able to move a lot faster and move resources in a more agile fashion. And so this journey has been really about being disciplined and actively being patient, and also, I think I mentioned thinking, practicing thinking of the beginning with the end in mind, but also being patient, like really being patient with colleagues. And when I say colleagues, just thinking of colleagues being inside of systems and partners, and doing that careful dance of understanding that everyone is at a different place and meeting people where they are. Just like with our young people, it's literally modeling the same thing you would do in a classroom with young people. You have a diverse group of folks who have diverse needs, and everyone's coming to the same place for likely close simple meanings. They just want to learn. They want to figure things out. And so figuring out where folks are on the journey. So think of those as functions in a system. That's been the work. I know I said a lot, and hopefully helpful. It is really as complicated as my response has been, as complicated as it has been to navigate. I will say that. So
Yeah. And if people have their questions or comments, put them in the chat. We can also get to them at the end. But I just one more quick thing I was gonna ask Sharon on those findings. Particularly kids say we want help with practical things. And I think sometimes that's underappreciated when we're trying to build student supports, that we tend to think it's like the big barrier, or like we got to give you tutoring, and that's all there. But you were also just wanted to share a little bit more. The kids were saying like, we need some help with some of the practical life challenges.
I think, because I'm trying to go back to that space. It was the one I want to say it's a very powerful space when you sit with young people and you ask them like, what do you want? And then they have these ideas. I think the understanding is that within the school context, they already spend hours in the school building doing academic type things. For them, what's most important is not being in the building, but if they have to be in the building, they're doing non-academic type things. And so it raises that tension of wanting to support them to make sure that they're on track and they're meeting requirements and moving across to different like classes well, and also acknowledging that they're young people and they have interests and they have all these passions they want to explore, and what spaces are programs allowing that, whether it's just moving them from the physical location to just I think for me it was just really interesting to hear that, where there's like, I just need someone to talk to who's not going to judge me, because everyone around me is judging me. They're telling me I don't know anything, I don't know what's good for me. I just someone who's going to listen and we can have conversations. The driver's license part was a part of it, because again, that gives you access to freedom, and even things like just being able to do laundry, like some very basic things that it can easily be taken for granted, but for them in their own world, it's like crucial to how like they're navigating those spaces and their realities.
Yeah. And those little things can in their minds become big barriers if they have no idea like how to do them. So it's just very, very good. All right, I'm gonna
chime in. Could I chime in really quick and
just
also say, from a training perspective, our trauma-informed mentoring training was actually the greatest attended training out of all of our trainings last year. So it's the other side of that, right? So young people need the support, and the adults that are running organizations that are serving as mentors are saying, this is where we need more training. So
absolutely.
That's complimented. And I just want to call out city schools for saying, they called it early and often when the pandemic hit, and said having a caring adult in the lives of every single student in Baltimore City is critical. And so kudos to you for that. And I think what Dr. Sharon was just voicing over is a testament to that.
Yeah,
because they'll
100%.
show up for mentoring, even if they don't show up for school, and we can get them that way.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Jeannie, I'm going to turn it over to you to bring us home, our friends from Albuquerque and Manzano High School.
Thank you. What is it doing here? Can you guys
see it?
You can see it. Okay. All right. My name is Jeannie Stark, and Rachel Vigil is my principal, and Anthony Strickland is the head of the department. But they're not here today. Just sorry. Is it still sharing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. My whole screen just went blank. Give me a minute to figure out what's going on. There we go. Sorry. And I'm the Student Success Systems Coordinator here at Manzano High School and also for the District of Albuquerque Public Schools. My two colleagues weren't able to attend, Anthony because he's in class and Rachel because there's some stuff going on. Let's just leave it at that. Manzano High School is in the northeast part of Albuquerque at the base of the Manzano Mountains. And we are part of the East Mountain area of Albuquerque, which is rural, but then we are part of the lower economic part of Albuquerque. We are one of the most diverse high schools in New Mexico at number 18. So we had to change our problem of practice mid-year. And so what happened was last year, our legislature and our New Mexico PED, Public Education Department, changed our graduation requirements. And we knew that these graduation requirements were going to happen, and we knew the changes were going to happen. But then right about October, they decided to give the districts autonomy on how these graduation requirements would come out. And so in the middle of all of this, we had to stop what we were doing, and because the graduation requirements started to center around our math. So we started shifting gears in our vertical articulation because we realized at this point our middle schools were screaming for support, and we were also screaming for support from our middle schools as well. So right now, what our graduation requirement is going to be going forward next year is we have 4 units, 2 of which will be algebra and geometry, and then the other 2 could be integrated pathways. They just have to be the equivalent of Algebra 1. This is where we're starting to see the difference though. So our middle schools can now offer high school credit at Algebra 1. And we were super excited about that because we do have students that come into high school who are algebra ready, but they end up being in a class with peers who aren't algebra ready. So we are excited that they get to get high school credit at the 8th grade for Algebra 1, but they're now also going to get health and personal finance at the 8th grade that are going to be high school credits. With that being said, what does that look like? And so we had to start getting together to look at what does a personal finance credit look like? What does a health credit look like? And what do we expect at the high school level? And how is this going to be given at the middle school level? Plus, this is starting next year. So all the incoming 9th graders will not have had this option. So how is the high school next year going to support the incoming 9th graders and support the 8th graders at the middle school? So how do we still build a strong math foundation and include our social studies counterparts and our science counterparts? Well, we started looking at this conceptual understanding. We started focusing instruction to address the key components of mathematical proficiency, but also bringing in the science and the social studies. So conceptual understanding, looking at the comprehension of math, procedural fluency, how is this skill carried over throughout time, productive disposition, the sensible and useful, worthwhile, coupled with the belief of diligence, as well as adaptive reasoning and strategic competence. The new graduation requirements at the middle school and high school levels require alignment for student success. So we have to work together to make sure that our 8th graders and our 9th graders are getting what they need to be successful. And our middle school teachers are not high school teachers, so we're having to work with them on what does that look like? What skills does a proficient math student need to acquire? And how do we access skills to determine proficiency? So we started making this picture of what a successful math student looks like. And then we also started talking about what do we need to determine proficiency? Also thinking outside of, let's not just go with the standardized test, because that doesn't necessarily mean that the child is proficient or not proficient. We need to be able to see them in real time. So 8 mathematical practices that all students should master in order to be considered proficient. They need to make sense of the problems and persevere in solving them. One of the things that we're seeing not only at the 8th grade, but also in the high school level is our students give up or they quit working before they see the problem to fruition, before they see it to the end. Reason abstractly and quantitatively. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. And so when you see something, you're critiquing someone else, we're actually working really hard on how we do that in a professional way. Model with mathematics. How carrying this over to our career technical education, what does geometry look like in the workforce, and why is math important to be a successful adult? Using appropriate tools to use appropriate tools strategically. Attend to precision, look for and make use of structure, and look for and express regularity in repeated reasoning. So one of the things we looked at was improving student achievement starts with the educators in the classroom and the beliefs and their willingness to share the learning responsibilities with students. We started noticing that our students, both at the 8th grade level and at the freshman level, seemed to be more involved in the classrooms when they had ownership of the learning process. So we came unproductive beliefs. The purpose of assessments is to hold teachers accountable, and we wanted to make sure that went away. A few years back, we had a governor that actually used our assessments against us, against teachers. And so we're still fighting through that idea that assessments are only used to grade teachers. Instead, we want assessments to provide information that help us improve teaching and learning of mathematics, but also the teaching and learning in all of the classes. So we're looking at doing learning walks, not only within the high school, but at the middle school, and then having the middle school teachers come to the high school to do learning walks, and having the high school teachers go to the middle school to do learning walks. Learning walks are non-evaluative. We go in with the lens of what do I notice? What do I see is going on? And we're very low on the inference ladder, but we are looking at what we're seeing and we're trying to come back with best practices. Classroom assessments interrupt the instructional flow. That's an unproductive belief, but a belief that is productive is assessment should be embedded in everything that we do. We should always be looking to see what our students are doing, if they're doing it correctly, how we can better the instruction, where do our students need us the most. A single assessment can be used to make important decisions. That's an unproductive belief. We need to use multiple data sources. Multiple data sources are needed to provide accurate picture of the teacher and the student performance. Unproductive belief, assessments is something done to students. Assessments is a process that should help students reflect on their own learning, and they need to be a part of the assessments. We need to help them recognize when they are high, when they have high quality work, and then when they need to maybe rethink what's going on. Unproductive, stopping instruction to review and take practice tests leads to improving student performance on high stakes tests. What we want, our productive beliefs is ongoing review and distributing practice within effective instruction is very productive. So having a review at the beginning and a review throughout the period will help the students start to build those connections and go across and take it outside of the classroom as well. Formative assessments cross traditional boundaries, including involving both the teacher and the students. And evidence from the assessment has direct impact on what comes in next in the learning process. So we should be using the assessments to see what we need to do next. Do we need to reteach or do we need to go forward? Do we need to go a little bit faster? Clear lesson learning goals and success criteria so students understand what they are aiming for. Evidence of learning gathered during the lessons. A response to evidence. Peer and self-assessments to strengthen student learning. efficacy, confidence, and autonomy. We want our students to have stakes in the game. We want them to take control of their learning and have a collaborative classroom culture where students and teachers are partners in the learning process. When we saw this happening this year, we started to see our students really own their learning. Now we're taking our middle school teachers as we're working on that curriculum for the 8th grade teachers next year, and we're really using our vertical articulation time to look at that. This is one of the areas where we're really looking at the classroom culture and having the students become part of the learning process and the planning. We still are working on those building the thinking classroom, which is what we started working on at the beginning of the year. It's just now we're really focusing in and we're including our social studies and our science teachers because of the new requirements at the middle school level as far as high school graduation requirements go. Begin with the problem, visibly random groups, vertical non-permanent surfaces, using oral instructions, defront the room, which makes it more of a circle, various directions. So they're not, that you don't have kids sitting at the front of the room, they're sitting within the room. Answering questions, acknowledge but don't answer, keeping the kids thinking all the time. Instead of saying their name first, ask the question and then pull in the kids. We have some teachers that have gone back to the sticks in the cup. Building autonomy. We want our groups of students to know what they need to do. So we're going to model how groups can visit other groups when they are stuck or when they are done. So how can this group of students who's stuck on this problem maybe reach out to this group of students who are already done with the problem? Hints and extensions. So challenge and ability, level to the bottom. Debrief class discussions, direct teaching of the lesson. Once all groups pass a minimum threshold, then debrief again. So we're now no longer going, okay, we just have to teach this to get through the book by the end of the year, but we are teaching to proficiency. We want to teach to mastery. Students' notes, these need to be student created. They need to be able to select, synthesize, and recognize the ideas, but we also want them to come back to the notes over and over and over again. So we need to provide them time for this. After we teach, we need to give them time to revisit their notes. And then assessment, process to product, group work to individual work, student learning. Where are they? Where are they going? And when we look at our assessment, if you notice, it's not just sitting at your desk and taking a test. So what are we going to do? Well, we are really diving deeper into our graduation requirements. And at the high school level, we're really wanting to bridge that to CTE. And now our middle schools are talking about CTE as well. That's our career technical education. And bringing in, what do you need to be successful in the workforce as an adult? Developing characteristics of a math graduate at the middle and high school level. What does it look like to be a person that has math ability, but that's successful as an adult? Conversation with the district to support vertical articulation PD days. All of the schools, so Monsanto has written this grant. We've reached out to our feeder schools and all the other schools. It started to become something that our whole district now is looking at, and they keep saying we need to have time to have vertical articulation with our feeder schools. We need to know what's going on at the high school. The high school needs to know what's going on in the middle school. The elementary school wants to be involved. And this year, with these new graduation rates, we're actually ahead of the game because we already had this established vertical articulation group where other schools are now reaching out to us and going, how did you get it started? What's your processes and procedures? What are you doing? Because now they're having to do vertical articulation as well. Because keep in mind, our middle school teachers now are offering courses that the middle school kids get high school credit for. So we also are always reviewing, reflecting, rethinking, and revising what we're doing. And so right here in January, boy, we had to review, reflect, and rethink what we were doing because our new graduation requirements were thrown on us, and it was like, oh, and by the way, the middle school is going to be offering a credit and a half for high school credit. And the middle schools were like, whoa, what does that look like? And so that's where we came in. So that's our vertical articulation journey. And do you have any questions?
Thank you, Jeannie. That was wonderful. So I have a small question and a bigger question. My small question is on that building thinking classroom slide. Was that something your team created, and like what software did you use?
No, it was something they have actually been doing a book study prior to this. We've been doing a book study prior to this, and we really took that map and went, yes, this is what we're going to use. And so they're using that now. It's really the basis to their to what's going on right now with our middle school partners.
Wonderful, wonderful. And then my bigger question is that, we're all talking about all kinds of collaborations. Sometimes it's the community foundation and districts and partners, or sometimes it's a school district and nonprofits. And this is like middle and high schools, which might be the toughest collaboration of all. So I'm just curious about how you sort of broke that barrier. And was it really just this joint problem of suddenly we have to give high school credit, or was there something more than that?
So no, this actually started 2 years ago. And I was really afraid when we first started that it would become a gripe session. I was really worried about that, but it didn't. They really wanted to know what was required at the high school level, and the high school teachers wanted to know what was happening at the middle school level. Within our first year, we learned that our middle school curriculum did not align with our high school curriculum. And so we spent that whole first summer aligning our middle school and high school curriculums because they did not, it was like two different worlds. It was just crazy. And so that was one of the things. And this all came out of the fact that our math scores are so low, and trying to figure out how can we best support our kids.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I just want to thank everybody for the amazing work you're doing and the power of your community collaborations and sharing it with us today. Greg, if you could just go to the final slide. But I just want to thank everyone for the amazing work and your ability to share. And I just want to remind folks that are listening today, either live or on tape, that we have some upcoming events sort of related to our Pathways work. We have our community of practice for our grad partnership on unlocking the power of data to drive student success. And we also have our ongoing attendance solutions network, which are both open and all for anyone to join. You can see the information there, and we'll be sending around the PowerPoint to everybody as a follow-up, that you can get it there. So again, I just want to thank everybody for the amazing work you're doing for your communities and your students and your families. And with that, I'll leave us all by saying onwards and be well, and thank you. Great job, everybody.